Hey guys, welcome back to the episode of the Moneyball Cards podcast. In this week's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. This one right here, who deserves to be in it. But first, a few quick items for this episode. Jordan is sick this week, so I'm only going to be recording it. He will be back next week, so don't worry about that. Next thing as well, it's always the card show pickup. So I got this Tarkenton. It is a 1962. Let me put this over here so you guys can see it a little bit better. Absolute beautiful card. Now the black borders are like that of the 1971 tops, and this is also a short print Hall of Fame quarterback, centered really nicely. Got a good deal on it because there's a few bad SGC comps on it. I think this card was kind of undervalued in SGC. CSG 5.5, that was off-centered, and the same grade of 5.5 went for about like 240. The SGC 5.5 went for like 170. So I paid 150 for this card. Awesome quarterback to add into the Hall of Fame collection. I did not have this card, a bit rare to grab. So super happy with that at Collector's Con. Also letting you guys know that we are working on a new logo for the channel, some new branding as well. So keep an eye out on that. And we're going to also be on some audio platforms within the next few weeks. So you guys can watch it on YouTube to see the live visualization, or you can listen to it in your car for just the audio. So super happy to be able to get both of these things out really, really soon. And I know we haven't been uploading all the time, but it's been super busy with the holidays and everything like that. On my other channel, Breakout Cards just uploaded a book, or I should say uploaded, but published a book I've been working on for the last 11 months and finished the 52 card shows. So been pretty busy on that side of things. Jordan just got a promotion in his job, so we're going to get back into swing of things and try to upload at least 1 to 2 times a week. Now, on the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot, I just want to let you guys know who I'm voting for. I'm also going to be showing you guys the data on the screen through Baseball Reference and Fangraphs to support my decisions on who I voted for. Now, I don't care if a player took steroids. I agree it's wrong to take steroids, but I believe a lot of players from the era took steroids. Where I'm like 50-50 or like iffy on is players getting caught with steroids in the 2000s, because players knew the consequences behind it. There was already all the hearings in Congress, and people knew, do not take steroids. It is considered cheating, and saw the backlash. So kind of iffy on that one. The only player that I'm voting for that got caught with steroids in the 2000s is going to be Alex Rodriguez. His stats are absolutely insane. WAR-wise, home run-wise, he almost had 700 home runs. And to my head, I think he had over 3,000 hits. Don't remember. I have to look on the computer. You guys will see. Now, I did not vote for Manny Ramirez. I remember him getting caught while he was playing on the Tampa Bay Rays. He had decent stats overall. If he didn't take steroids, would he be in the Hall of Fame or not? I don't really know. But that's the reason why I'm not going to vote for Manny Ramirez. He was slightly above the Hall of Fame level, but caught with steroids. Alex Rodriguez was very, very elite, upper echelon type of Hall of Fame if he didn't get caught. So here's my votes. I'll tell you guys right now, I voted for 10 spots because there's a lot of players here, 30 in total. So each voter can vote up to 10 players. My honorable mentions, again, Manny Ramirez. And I also put Wagner there. Really, really great relief pitcher, but I think his prime was a little short on that side of things. Again, relief pitchers kind of have it easier as well compared to starting pitchers, because starting pitchers have to pitch at least 5 innings. A relief pitcher only pitches 1. And if you're a better pitcher, stamina, more pitches available to you, you often become a starter, not a reliever. So I'm a little biased against relief pitchers, just letting you guys know. But Wagner is an honorable mention. He did not get in my top 10. So my top 10 I have is Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens. First off, 2 absolute legends in their positions. I think even if they didn't take steroids, they would have easily cleared the Hall of Fame. Next 2, some people voted for, others didn't, which is Andrew Jones and Jeff Kent. You'll see exactly why I voted for these guys. Next up is David Ortiz. I think he's going to end up making the Hall. Really, really great hitter for the Boston Red Sox. His career kind of started late because he didn't perform well with the Twins, but as soon as he went to Boston, man, he was a beast. And he retired at the height of his career. People are talking about with Buster Posey, but man, look at Ortiz's last year. It was even better than Posey's. Next, Aroyd, which I talked about. One of the best defensive third basemen, which is Scott Rowling. Scott Rowling, not Rowling, guys. Then Kurt Schilling, Gary Sheffield, and Sammy Sosa. Sheffield and Sosa over 500 home runs. I love those milestones. in Kurt Schilling. Really, really great pitcher. A little too political, whether you agree with him or disagree with him. A lot of voters will not vote for him because of that. But if you look based off of pure statistics, Schilling belongs. So I'm going to jump on the computer right now and go over some more data for you guys. Okay, so here is Baseball Reference. They have all 30 players that were listed on the ballot. I put them in ABC order. Really, really great website for data. Another website is Fangraphs, their competitor to Baseball Reference. Now, I don't know if they have a full list for the Hall of Fame ballot, but I'm just be searching some of the different players over here. And then this is another tool I use for sports card data, which is Market Movers. So I can show you guys some of the different charts on prices on cards. So over here, the first player I wanted to take a look at so you guys kind of know how good of a player he was is Barry Bonds. Now I'm going to load this over here and you guys can see a little bit of difference between Fangraphs and Baseball Reference. But before we go into Bonds, what really classifies a Hall of Fame baseball player, at least in the eyes of most voters and also people that look at stats? So you have the old school traditional way of voting, which someone looks at milestones a player has. So for example, on a hitter, someone looks at a guy who's hit either 500 home runs or 3,000 hits. You're part of the 500 home run club or 3,000 hit club. Now, historically, all these players have made the Hall of Fame, except for people that have cheated or people that bet on baseball. For example, like Pete Rose has the most hits, but he's not in the Baseball Hall of Fame because that also goes into the character clause, which some people upheld, some people don't really care about. I'm not here to argue or not. I'm just looking at pure statistics. What people do on the baseball field, what they do outside the game of baseball is none of my concern. So that's on the batter side of things. Now, if you're a pitcher, a lot of people look at a milestone called wins. Now, in the modern day, with how data is analyzed, wins don't matter too much. There's a lot of factors that really aren't in the pitcher's hand. For example, Jacob deGrom playing for the Mets. It's not his fault he's playing for a bad team currently. If he played on someone, let's say, for example, like the Tampa Bay Rays, where they do historically well season after season, he would have a lot more wins. Or if he played for the New York Yankees, he would have more wins playing for that team. So you can't really factor in that because deGrom, while he is technically a hitter on his team, there's still 8 other players that affect the offensive total for the Mets that day. And if they all do poorly and the Mets score 0 runs and he's only given up 1 run and let's say he pitches a complete game, he gets a loss instead of a win. So it's really not fair to look at wins. In the past, I understand why people looked at wins, but there's still a lot of voters that will vote automatically if someone has 300 wins. That's an old school way of thinking, but that's how people vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, a stat that is a lot more favorable for pitchers, no matter what team they are on, is strikeouts. And in baseball, strikeout is when you throw 3 strikes and a batter is out. And a milestone for that is 3,000 strikeouts, kind of comparable to the hits. 3,000, pretty easy to remember on that side of things. Now, there's another stat in recent years that people are looking at for a threshold stat, and that is wins above replacement, also known as WAR. Now, what makes WAR interesting is there's different ways to measure WAR. You have Fangraphs WAR and you also have Baseball Reference WAR. These are the 2 most popular types out there, and there's a threshold for that as well. Most people look at between a 60 and 65 threshold as WAR to make the Baseball Hall of Fame. Again, this is a new stat that people look at for the Hall of Fame side of things. So there's some adjustment period with, there's a lot of old school voters that will not look at WAR. There's new voters that only look at WAR. There's so much more to a player than just WAR or a stat like 3,000 hits or 500 home runs or 3,000 strikeouts. So I know that's a lot of data. I don't want to confuse you guys, but that's kind of where baseball is at right now. You need to look at those stats, but also have their entire profile of some advanced stats, what they did during championships, what awards they've won. There's a lot to it. So I wanted to show you guys that. Now, here's the difference on Fangraphs and Baseball Reference. So like, for example, Barry Bonds. Let's up over here. So you can see over here on Fangraphs, Barry Bonds' WAR is 164.4. But then on Baseball Reference, his WAR is 162.7. So not too bad on that side of things. But when you go into other players, for example, catchers, Fangraphs and Baseball Reference have complete different ways of calculating WAR. I cover this in my Buster Posey video, so make sure to watch that if you have not. Defense is going to be a little bit controversy whether Andrew Jones should make the Baseball Hall of Fame or not, and I'll be covering it. So Barry Bonds. Here's why I think he should be a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame if he didn't take steroids. Look at his WAR on Baseball Reference, 162. On Fangraphs, it's 164. Again, remember I was telling you 60 to 65 is that threshold? Yeah, he's 100 over it. Home runs, he's at 762, leading that. Almost his 3,000 hits. On top of that, an OPS plus of 182 for his career, which is absolutely insane. Think about this. League average for an OPS plus is 100. Bonds is at 182. It's an absolute insane. You have 7 MVPs, 14-time All-Star, 8 Gold Gloves. It's so good. Bonds 100% deserves to be in the Hall of Fame if he didn't take steroids. Again, that clouds over him, but in my opinion, Major League Baseball didn't care about steroids. So Bonds 100% should go in. Next guy I wanted to take a look at is Roger Clemens. Clemens is pretty much the pitcher equivalent of Bonds. So you put this over here. So first off, he has MVP. He has 7 Cy Young Awards. If you guys don't know, the Cy Young Award, that is given to the best pitcher in a league. 2 Triple Crowns. He has 2 World Series championships and 7 ERA titles. Again, looking at just the WAR alone, 139 WAR, hit the 300 win threshold with 354 wins. Also has over here for strikeouts, load that over here, which you'll see over SO, 4,672. Well over the 3,000 threshold. Again, I think Bonds and Clemens, even without steroids, would have been Hall of Fame caliber players. No steroids helped their career, but even without them, I think they would have accomplished whether it's 3,000 strikeouts or 500 home runs. They were really, really great players. And for that reason, I believe 100% that they should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Next player, what I wanted to take a look at, who I voted for, is Andrew Jones. So I'm going to load up Andrew Jones over here. And this is sometimes where WAR doesn't show the full story. So I'm going to put this over here. And also kind of shows you why some players fall off and why you shouldn't 100% believe in people are guaranteed lock for the Baseball Hall of Fame. She had a discussion on Twitter recently about this. I was in a group and we were talking about players and people were saying Juan Soto is a lock for the Hall of Fame and same with Tatis, or so is Bryce Harper and all these other players. They have great trajectories for the Hall of Fame. They continue performing how they do, but no one is really a lock for the Hall of Fame. And Andrew Jones kind of shows that with his career. If you look through his stats through the age of 30, really, really impressive. I mean, he had, just doing some quick math over here, it looks like he had over 350 home runs because he's out 20, 40, 50, 60. Yeah, so about 350 home runs going into age 30 season, which a lot of people consider that the halfway point of a player's career. See now in baseball, a lot of 28, 29-year-olds are getting these insane $300 million contracts. Well, Andrew Jones shows you why that is not always a good case. See, in his 28 season, he had 51 home runs, 29, 41. Then he had 26 his last season at Atlanta. A lot of people see he's lackluster, especially batting 222. But kind of fell off a cliff after that. It went to the Dodgers, batted 158, Texas 214, and the power was gone as well. But those first seasons up here, he was an absolute insane hitter. That being said, Andrew Jones was also really, really good in defense as a center fielder. In fact, you wouldn't believe it, but his defensive WAR is the highest out of all center fielders. And you might ask yourself, how does he have more defensive WAR than a player like Willie Mays? Well, the issue is with how WAR is calculated nowadays, and the defensive stats just don't translate as well as in the past. Their example of a really, really good defensive player that we know from stories is Tris Speaker, and he's really not awarded with that WAR he really should be. On the defensive side of things, it's just so hard to measure players in the past without seeing the film of every single play. It's difficult. So when you look at defensive WAR and try to compare a player of today to the past, you really, really can't. Again, I talked about this a lot with catchers and how framing is part of the defensive WAR calculation. And that was all in the Buster Posey video. But besides that, Andrew Jones, for his career up through age 30, did really well. Again, factoring even those bad seasons, he still had 63 WAR on Baseball Reference, and on Fangraphs, he also had 67 WAR. So very, very borderline between that 60 and 65. When I look at it though, is he had 10 gold gloves. He is a really, really good player. He might not be the most, or might not be the best defensive center fielder, but overall, he is definitely a top 10 of all time defensive wise. And also you have 5 All-Star games. One thing I look at though as well is the bat. Now, a 254 batting average is really low. OPS plus 111, which means he was slightly above league average on the OPS side of things, but he did hit 434 home runs. So between having over 60 WAR, the 400 home runs, and really good on defense, Andrew Jones, in my opinion, gets the vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame. Next guy I wanted to vote for is Jeff Kent. So let's find Kent on here. So Jeff Kent is under that 60 to 65 WAR threshold, at least on Baseball Reference. You go on Fangraphs as well for Jeff Kent. We'll load that up just to double check. And we're looking at 56. So very comparable between both sites. But I like Kent as an offensive second baseman. See, besides like Rogers Hornsby, there wasn't really many great offensive second basemen. In fact, Jeff Kent leads in home runs for second basemen at 377. Across the board, OPS plus a 123, which is decent. Again, nothing compares to like Bonds, but he's a freak. He's on another side of things. But if you take a look at the 100 average for whole career, 123 is pretty good. Almost 2,500 hits, but I really like the 377 home runs because it's the most as a second baseman. Top of that, he won an MVP award and was a 5-time All-Star. Now, defensive-wise, Jeff Kent wasn't that great. He was pretty much league average. He didn't really help out on the defense side of things. As you can see, his player batting advanced stats over here. But if you scroll down, you can also see standard fielding. And there's a stat over here called R total. So this is how many runs he saves above average. And you can see for his career, it's -3. So pretty much league average wise, second baseman, not really good. You can't really get anything like that. Whereas compared to Andrew Jones, if you load up Andrew Jones in here, just to show you guys that as well, a bit of a difference. The amount of runs he saved defensive wise. So you go to his R total, that category right there, highlighted. You can see 254 versus -3. So Kent, he gets my vote just based off of how well he performed offensively. Defense, very average overall. Next guy on the list to take a look at is David Ortiz. Now, Ortiz was linked in a report about steroids. And the one thing Ortiz has going against him was he's a DH. WAR really doesn't favor DHs, but man, Ortiz was a slugger at the plate. So let's take a look at some of his stats so you guys can see. First off, he's only worth 55 WAR. So as I told you earlier, WAR does not help when you're a DH. But if you take a look at this, almost 2,500 hits, 541 home runs, an OPS plus of 141. Big Poppy, man. He was a great guy. And what's interesting is Poppy is a late bloomer. If you take a look at some of his stats, he really didn't start performing well until he got traded to Boston at age of 27. And you can even see his last season that he played in 2016. I remember having my fantasy baseball team. He still hit 38 home runs. So he had definitely had years left into him. And one thing that, again, was linked against him was that steroids. This is his first time on the ballot, but people love Ortiz compared to some of these other steroid users like Roger Clemens or Barry Bonds. He just has that fan favorite. Boston Red Sox players and fans stick up for him. He's well respected within the game of baseball. But David Ortiz, 500 home run threshold. That is why he gets my vote. Now, next few guys, I'm just start loading a few up here, make it a little bit faster before we take a look at some cards. Alex Rodriguez, Scott Rowland, Curt Schilling, Gary Sheffield, and Sammy Sosa. So Alex Rodriguez got caught with steroids, suspended, but 117 WAR, almost 700 home runs, OPS plus of 140, and 3,000 plus hits. All the milestones, including multiple MVPs, Gold Gloves, 14-time All-Star, and won a World Series. Scott Rowland we'll go over a little bit later, showing you guys some more defensive side of things. Curt Schilling does have a higher ERA. His whip is lower at 1.137, which is good, but over the 3,000 strikeouts, you can see he didn't hit 300 wins, but he does have almost 80 WAR. So a lot of things going for him on that side of things. 100% would vote for Schilling as well. Gary Sheffield, 509 home runs, 2,700 hits, OPS plus of 140. So you guys start seeing patterns where Hall of Fame players really start performing well. You know, some of their advanced stats. Batting average over here at 292. Batting average don't always use, but I know a lot of people like that number. Sammy Sosa, 600 home runs. Him and McGuire helped save baseball in the 90s. OPS plus a little bit lower. Again, 128, but still well over 100. Batting average, again, lower as well. 273, 2,400 hits. But I wanted to go over Scott Rowland's case because I saw a lot of people say he doesn't deserve to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame because he wasn't a great hitter, but was good on defense. So defensive wise, 8 Gold Gloves, really great on that. 7 All-Stars. So you can see it, only 300 home runs, which isn't a lot for a third baseman. Batting average, don't really like using, but people always bring that up. 281, so above average. And he had an OPS plus of 122. Again, over the 100 average for OPS, but not to the extent of some of these other Hall of Famers. But Rowland was really good on defense. One of the best ever. And you can take a look at this over here, as I showed you earlier. If you go over here to the R total, he had 140 defensive runs saved. And even offensively, you go over here, he had 234 runs there. So between both offensively and defensively, Scott Rowland was a good player. So now let's take a look at some of the different cards these players have. So first is Barry Bonds. And his classic card that people go after is his update rookie, or I should say traded. Now there's a huge price gap difference between the PSA 9 and 10. I'm gonna load these up over here so you guys can see those. All right, so I'm loading up the PSA 10s and 9s here. So you can see with the 10s, there's 4,775 10s out there, which is a lot. But these 10s right now are selling for, let's see, where the last one sold. $500. One went way down over there at $250, like $375. So we could save about like $400 across the board on those. Kind of flatline going down a little bit. But the 9s, on the other hand, like about $40, $50, $40. So there's a 10x multiplier between the 10s and 9s. Pop a lot lower at the 10 and 9 level. But I'm kind of curious, is this a junk wax era? How does this compare to Ken Griffey Jr.? We know his 10s are really expensive. I'm just curious with pops. I didn't want to load them up on PSA. So the pop on the PSA 10 is 4,000. Also 5,000. So a little bit higher on Bonds compared. And then also in the PSA 9s, about 27,000 to 22,000. So total 27,000. Total over here is at 30,000. A little bit comparison. Again, junk wax here. But you can see on the ratio of the Bonds cards, the value wise average is about a 10x multiplier. On Ken Griffey cards, it is also about a 10x multiplier. It seems like a huge gap between a PSA 10 and a PSA 9 on these cards, but that's just across the board between some of the junk wax era things. I wanted to see if that PSA 9 was a little bit undervalued here between the two. Now, if I was going to buy only one Barry Bonds card, I'd recommend saving up for the Tiffany version. It is way more expensive. It is something I want to add in my collection one day. Made a mistake in not trading for it at the National. Had the opportunity to do so. I had to trade a LeBron rookie card for the Tiffany as a PSA 9. And you can kind of see how the price differences are. Now, this one right here, the 9 last sold for $1,400. Another sold for $1,200, $1,000. And I also had a 9 of LeBron. I ended up selling it. But at the time, these were about equal in value. I had to pay, I think it was $75 extra, and I did not do that. Regret not doing it, but you can see the value of the 9 here on a Tiffany base. The 10s are almost $10,000. So if you had to save up and buy one card, I'd recommend the Tiffany. Otherwise, try to get into one of these. I mean, you see how much the Ken Griffey's are for similar pops at over here. Ken Griffey a lot more popular, but $2,200 and $240 versus over here, which was, I'll have to load it back up over there. It was like $400 to $40. Another player to take a look at is Roger Clemens. Now, Roger Clemens had a Fleer update from 1984. He also had a Tiffany in 85. Both are really good cards. Most people consider this one his true rookie card. So load this up over here so you guys can see the different pops. Put that over here. So there's been no 10s that have sold recently. 10s are pretty scarce. I have to look up the pop report. But you can see the pops on 9s are 2,500, pops 2,000 as well, which is a lot lower pop compared to Barry Bonds or even like Ken Griffey Jr. And value-wise on these, you have the 8 at 230 and the 9 at 405. If I were you, I'd rather just buy a 9 for only $200 more, a lot less of a pop. And I know the 10s are way, way more expensive than the 9s on this one as well. Again, a lot scarcer, but you can see both of them are kind of flatline. If I had to buy a card between Bonds and Clemens, I'd rather buy the Clemens because it's a lower pop card. These have always attained a lot of value. Not to say the Bonds haven't either. I've heard from my dad, who once owned a LCS and also is in the hobby quite a bit for a while, that the Bonds rookie at one point was $100. So the fact that you can get a 9 right now for $40, if it makes the Hall of Fame, I think there's a good potential that that card goes up. We saw, and I'm gonna make this full another episode, but as soon as the Veterans Committee made their choices for the Baseball Hall of Fame, a lot of these cards spiked. I think the same thing is going to happen with Barry Bonds as well, because that validates his career. Because he's not in the Hall of Fame, a lot of people don't really like Bonds. As soon as he makes the Hall of Fame, you're going to watch that price increase. And we'll do a whole episode on that as well, making the Hall of Fame, what impact does that have on sports cards. But you can see for Roger Clemens, the 84 update is the way to go. I don't want to bore you guys too much with all this stuff. I want to do one more card as well, which is Alex Rodriguez, his SP foil. So now A-Rod, if you had to buy one of his rookie cards, I'd recommend the SP foil. And we'll put over here the 9s and 8s for Jeter as well. It's his best card overall. And the Jeter is kind of like a iconic one in the hobby. A-Rod is kind of the same way as well. I remember seeing these a lot in the Beckett magazines, but you can see the pop on the 9s, there's 1,600 of them. Pop on the 8, there's 12,000. So there's a lot of 8s out there, a lot less 9s. Price-wise, over here, end average, 400 compared to 53. So again, there's like an 8x multiplier on this one. For the Jeter, between the 8 and 9, you can see 500 compared to almost 8,600. The pop, though, on the 9 is a lot less. So you have 612 compared to 9,000. So you can see there's pretty much triple the pop on Alex Rodriguez's, which is kind of interesting. I know they scratch so easily. Maybe there's a difference between 93 and 94. But you can see price-wise as a 9, 400 compared to almost 8,700. And even as an 8, which there's 9,000 of them, which is a ton, $600 compared to an 8, which is $53. So you guys can see that there's a lot of value in Alex Rodriguez. I know Jeter's way, way more popular. A-Rod had much better stats than Jeter, by the way, but just looking at how these cards compare year after year based off of their pops and their current value right now, that 8 and 9, there's some value here currently if Alex Rodriguez makes the Hall of Fame. But based off the class, those are 3 cards I'd take a look at right now if I were you. First off, my number 1 card to take a look at is going to be that Tiffany on Barry Bonds. Really, really pricey, but it is what it is on that side of things. If you can't afford that, you can get the normal one, but that wouldn't be my number 1 choice after that. Number 2, I'd recommend the Fleer update on Roger Clemens. It's been an iconic card in the hobby, always been in the hands of the dealers, and it is an expensive card still. But get the 9 because it's just a little bit more expensive. And as you get higher grades, the prices, they spike a lot faster and go up a lot more. So go with that number 2. And then this Alex Rodriguez SP foil. Now, all these other guys on this list have other rookie cards as well, but I just wanted to highlight 3 of them and show you guys how I can use market movers, kind of do some analysis based off of some of the different pop reports and the prices. It's really, really good tool. If you guys want to use market movers and get a discount, you can use code Moneyball and save yourself 20% on that. Anyways, next week, Jordan is going to be back and we're going to have a full episode side to side with a discussion. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe.